Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at washingtech.com/book. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Moving the needle. Welcome to the Washingtech Policy Podcast.
Curating communications, media, and tech policy news so you don't have to. News, interviews, everything you need without the axe to grind. It's the Washingtech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
The GOP keeps pushing on Clinton's emails, even though the DOJ has closed its probe. The Islamic State's online efforts confound law enforcement, and Marcus Jiménez is my guest. FBI Director James Comey recommended no charges against Hillary Clinton for using a private email server for official State Department business when she served as Secretary of State. But Comey did say Clinton was extremely careless in her handling of classified information and discredited some of the statements Clinton had made previously. Attorney General Loretta Lynch accepted Comey's recommendation, effectively putting an end to the investigation. But Comey testified on Thursday before the House Oversight Committee, shedding new light on this controversy. He told the oversight panel that Clinton had failed to turn over thousands of work-related emails to the State Department, even though she had said that she turned over everything. He also testified and declared under oath that the FBI did not coordinate its recommendation with the White House or Department of Justice or the Clinton campaign. But House Republicans are now requesting that the FBI evaluate Clinton's previous sworn statements before Congress to determine if she perjured herself. And the State Department is considering disciplinary action against current State Department employees who worked with Clinton and knew about or facilitated the presidential candidate's use of a private email server. Federal law enforcement officials told the Senate Homeland Security panel on Wednesday that the United States' ground game in Iraq and Syria to destroy the Islamic State's capabilities isn't doing much to thwart the Islamic State's online recruiting efforts. FBI Executive Assistant Director Michael Steinbach said, quote, "No matter the format, the message of radicalization spreads faster than we imagined just a few years ago. We may see a more dangerous world in the short term," end quote. The law enforcement officials who testified said that even when they do get leads on recruitment efforts via Facebook and other social networks, the leads quickly go stale as the subjects switch to encrypted networks. Jeff Selden at Voice of America News has full coverage. Trump has offended once again, this time with an anti-Semitic reference, when he tweeted an image of Hillary Clinton with the caption, quote, "most corrupt candidate ever," end quote, superimposed over a Star of David. Trump's Twitter account deleted the image 2 hours later, replacing the Star of David with a circle. A Los Angeles law firm is suing Snapchat on behalf of parents seeking class action status for exposing children to indecent and inappropriate material without including a warning in its terms of service. Snapchat's Discover feature pulls in content from sites like Cosmopolitan and BuzzFeed that contain sexually explicit material. The complaint alleges these practices violate the Communications Decency Act, which requires internet services to notify parents about the availability of parental control features. Elizabeth Wise at U.S. Today has more. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has opened an age discrimination investigation into Google's hiring practices. The plaintiff is a 47-year-old female systems engineer who interviewed at Google but was never hired. The complaint alleges that Google has received multiple age discrimination complaints. The Mercury News has more. Finally, Karen Turner at the Washington Post reports that Apple has been granted a patent to remotely disable iPhone cameras at concerts, movie theaters, and other locations where piracy is a problem. The technology would emit infrared signals that would tell the phone to disable the camera. Privacy advocates are not happy and worried about what the government could do if it, too, were able to disable smartphone cameras, such as if the police were able to disable cameras last week in the police shootings of two black Pac-Man in Baton Rouge and St. Paul, Minnesota. Meanwhile, some privacy analysts are concerned about the privacy implications of Nintendo's new Pokemon Go game, which collects vast amounts of user data. The game's terms of service even contains a disclaimer saying the company would turn the data over to law enforcement. Pokemon Go has been downloaded millions of times over the past week, with daily usership nearing that of Twitter's. Stay with us. For Washington Tech Policy Podcast listeners, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You can listen at the gym, in the car, or on your morning run. How about The Third Wave, an entrepreneur's vision for the future by Steve Case?
The entrepreneurs of this era are going to challenge the biggest industries in the world and those that most affect our daily lives. They will reimagine our healthcare system and retool our education system. They will create products and services that make our food safer and our commute to work easier. But if this new generation of entrepreneurs is to succeed, the playbook from the second wave won't do.
You can download The Third Wave free by trying audible.com. Sign up for your free audiobook and 30-day trial today at washingtech.com/book. My guest today is Marcus Jiménez. Marcus is founder and CEO of Stickydocs, a content creation, data visualization, and publishing platform for enterprises of all kinds. In 2014, Stickydocs was the winner of the Tabby Business Award for Best Enterprise Marketing App. Marcus has also been recognized by Agency Post, the American Marketers Association, the Art Directors Club, the Society of Publication Designers, and the ADCOLOR Industry Coalition, where he was honored as a Change Agent Award Recipient and currently serves on its board of directors. Please welcome Marcus Jiménez. Today, we're going to continue our series on content marketing and looking at how you, whether you're a policy professional or entrepreneur, can make your information products more compelling with storytelling and data visualization. If you've ever struggled for months writing a white paper only to get almost zero online engagement through comments, likes, shares, and retweets, today's episode will demystify some of that for you, giving you specific tactics you can start implementing right away to tell better stories. So, Marcus, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Joe. Thank you for having me, and it's a privilege really to be here. So thanks.
So tell us about your company, Stickydocs, and the value it creates for its customers.
So Stickydocs is a content creation and digital publishing platform. And what we do is we bring data and insights to life as meaningful content and experiences for the workforce. So in short, we basically help clients collect, curate, design, and deploy complicated information as content, right? That's easily digestible, more approachable, and more fun and engaging. So really a key focus for us is on crafting, truly compelling stories, right? From client research and data and large academic volumes of research and insights. And what we really aim to do is really make that stuff stick, right, with users and readers of that information. And in today's sort of fragmented and constantly shifting media environment, it's even harder when you've got a younger, more discerning user, right? That's millennial and Gen Zers that are entering the workforce every day. So how do you get users to really digest and go out and actually utilize this critical information that these corporations are spending large dollars on, right? So if you think of a huge volume of research that they've gone out and conducted and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to collect, you can imagine a 400-page volume that now, a young millennial or Gen Zer has got to digest. Well, no one's really going to read it, especially if it's being emailed to them, right? So what we do is we help to create platforms and products and services that help these corporations sort of push that and deploy that information out, but in a way that's more like reading Wired or Fast Company and less like some kind of academic volume that they've got.
Yeah, it's really powerful stuff because, there's so many white papers here in DC, and it's really hard to sift through these reams and reams of white papers, not to mention the court cases we have to read. So, creating better infographics, creating better data visualization is critical, not to mention just engaging with that content. That's why I'm such a big fan of Snapchat. And I think policymakers should figure out a way to get on that. Do you do any work with Snapchat?
We've just started to explore that, as well as also the rise of like virtual reality. We've been constantly have been getting asked, it's timely, right? It's in culture. It's the hottest thing right now, and how to integrate these new platforms that are basically, they're popping up every other day. Snapchat is a great example of how a younger generation is going to more visually centric sort of exchange, right? If you think of the average mindset of a consumer today, the average attention span is that of less than a goldfish. It's less than 8 seconds. So hence the rise of Twitter, right? And Snapchat, where things are more in visually based format. Generations are becoming more and more versed in wanting to be able to exchange in this way. And yet a lot of these companies, they really struggle. Policymakers struggle with it. Government struggles with it. Educational systems struggle with it. And they just don't have the tools readily available for them to be able to kind of make that transition, right, into the next generation or the next wave. So that's what Stickydocs, that's what we're here to do. We help them to try to bridge that gap.
And what are some of the key challenges, Marcus, that you hear from clients who come to Stickydocs for help?
I think the number one challenge is, how do they get a compelling story out of the massive volume and data analysis that they've got, right? So if you can imagine, whether it's a case that you're working on or whether it's some type of academic volume that you're trying to deploy. For us, in our case, it's primarily market research, right? That's one of the verticals that we're within. But if you just think of communication in general and a volume of that, and how do you break that down? I think a lot of clients, they get stymied by the sheer oppression of that volume. Right? They're like, my God, I've got 300 pages. It's highly academic. How do I make this sort of fun, engaging, or how do I get people to even just pick it up? So they're daunted by volume, I think, is a key component. And then they're also daunted by the idea of creativity, right? If you think of especially in our vertical in market research, statisticians, right? Data analysts, strategists, account planners, you think of market researchers, they're actually not really creative minded as more as they are logic minded, right? And so they're analytically sort of motivated. And it's hard for them to be able to envision their information in any other format than in long form. Yet the user, right, if you think of the workforce or you think of the consumers that you want to actually read and digest your information, they're not thinking of it that way as an academic. They're thinking of it as like, what information do I need? And what information can I quickly get to so that I can go about my day? Because our value proposition is really, this goes back to that whole moment of, what do we really deliver? In the end, the most prized resource that we've got is time, and everyone's got less of it.
Right.
How do we get more of it? And so if you think of crafting your story using the end user in mind and only giving them what they need to know, as opposed to everything you want to tell them, it can change the way in which you develop and craft your communications, right? So that's a key component. That's the key message.
What's the best way to approach storytelling to make our information products more compelling? I'm hoping there's a process that we don't all have to be Shonda Rhimes to make our work more engaging. But is there a step-by-step process for telling better stories?
Absolutely. And I think Shonda Rhimes, if I could have 1 ounce of the talent of her, if I can just have 1 ounce of that, I would give I'd give my arms if I could do it. Yeah. I do think that one of the beauties of what she's been able to do, I think, well, there are 2 parts to this, right? One is tactically, right? Or if you think of it as, the base minimum, simplicity. I think your story has to be simple. How you get to the end result can have many layers of the story. And this goes back to traditional storytelling, right? And what Shonda Rhimes does brilliantly is crafting her arc, right? She knows where her end is going to be, but the journey is the complication, right? The journey, the intricacies of each and every one of the characters that she may build. So if you think of your story, whether it's a case or whether it's some type of research that you want to be able to provide, you've got to think of the end piece that you want to tell. What is the end line, the end takeaway that you want them to have? And then reverse engineer the story getting there. Build your story arc so that when you're deploying your information, you don't have to give it all in one dumping, right? Why can it not be part of an ecosystem? Think of it as like a tree that you can pluck the pieces of the story that you want. That type of engagement, that type of user-centric sort of mindedness, give people little bits of information and feed them a breadcrumb trail that takes them down this journey, down the rabbit hole that ultimately lands them at the key takeaway, is a much more memorable experience that users are looking for, as opposed to, hey, here's 300 pages that's really important and you need to read it. Well, good luck, because what we're finding is that a lot of that stuff falls on deaf ears, right? Simplicity is another key tenet, right? So you need your story to actually be simple. And when you break down your story, and that's the brilliance of what Shonda Rhimes has been able to do, is she can give you what feels like a complicated story, but each one of the different narratives into each one of the characters that she'll integrate into the storyline, they're simple, right? They're very simple to follow. It may be a love interest here, right? Love turmoil here, anger, right? Frustration or passion about something else. But they're it's multidimensional as the whole story, but it's one-dimensional as it relates to each and every one of those characters. So again, therein lies the layer of simplicity. But I think one of the most important things that we can take away from a process is making sure that your material is timely and that it's in culture. That's the key. The key is that it's got to be relevant from a cultural standpoint of the end user. Again, a lot of communicators, they want to say things because they want to push the communication out. Mm-hmm. Think of your communication if you reverse the trend, right? And I'm a creative director by trade, right? I did advertising and marketing for over 20 years. And one of the things that worked really well is for a long time, the industry is focused on pushing your material out. But when you create a 300-page volume and you try to PDF that thing or PowerPoint it and push it out via email, you're pushing. If I did half the amount of information, but I had 100 users seeking it out, I'm using a pull strategy. If I'm crafting my material so that it has more pull effect by the end user in mind, now I'm winning. Right? Now I'm getting traction. So if you're not getting traction with a lot of your users, and you mentioned this at the top of the cast, right? If your stuff's falling on deaf ears, think about the way in which you're deploying and what you're deploying. Is that the story that people want to hear? Is it culturally relevant for them? And if not, what can you do to sort of modify not only the story you're telling, but the way in which you're deploying it? That could be a big key to helping you to be able to get over that hurdle.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for policymakers who want to talk about issues that their audiences doesn't necessarily want to focus on. There are some policy issues that get a lot of traction and others that don't. So police brutality is one obviously hot topic right now that a lot of people are following and engaging with in the policy world. But when you talk about things like education, it doesn't have that same kind of traction. But these are structural barriers nonetheless. So it really comes down to, I guess, figuring out how to make something that doesn't seem relevant speak to the audience, and that's the difficulty. That's where you need great storytellers. I would give my left arm too to work with Shonda Rhimes.
Absolutely.
So Marcus, we've known each other a long time, and I know diversity and inclusion has been a core passion of yours. Can you tell us why it's so important and what you're doing to feed that passion?
Yeah, D&I, again, using a short acronym for D&I, has been something I've been immensely passionate. My story, it really does stem from my early formative years. And Steve Jobs had a great point about connecting the dots, right? That land you to where you are. When you can connect those dots, you can realize the patterns that have shaped your life. And I think a big piece of that was, again, from early on, I had great every time I reached a fork in the road, I had someone that pointed me in the right direction. So I had some great oversight, from some great teachers, relatives. My mother was a key component of it. She disciplined me to make sure that culture was ingrained as a part of me, as part of my identity. So knowing who I was is a big piece of it. But I think it really started to get to the forefront of my mind really when I reached high school, right? So, we both went to the same high school and over at LaGuardia and Fame. And one of my homeroom teacher in Mr. Bing was an African-American illustrator who actually designed bags for a lot of the fashion houses in New York. And I had no idea. I was just an art student. But he had found that I had the talent, and he knew that I had the ability to do it. and prevented me from dropping out of high school around 10th grade, and let me cut classes and stayed with him. He just knew I needed time. I needed time to decompress and get through some of the challenges that we had, right? Environmentally and just growing up when you're a teenager. It was just a very difficult life. But eventually he put me on the path to being a commercial artist. And so, long story short, I wound up being recruited right out of college to be an art director at a Hispanic ad agency. I had no idea that there even was a Hispanic ad agency, that there wasn't even an industry for it, that you can actually do Hispanic focused or multiculturally focused advertising and marketing. So that started me on a long path. And eventually I wound up connecting with a lot of individuals out of New York. And in 2007, I picked up an award from the ADCOLOR Industry Coalition as a change agent. And that really got me thinking that D&I is something that you can't just feel about personally, that we all stand on the shoulders, right, of those that came before us. And so it's up to us to be able to rise up and reach back and make sure that we're extending that rope line over the wall to be able to making sure that we get people to be able to climb over. So it's always been ingrained in me. Professionally, it's a big passion of mine. And one of the things that we've been doing to really be able to promote that, now that I'm a transplant from New York and came out to the Midwest. And one of the things that I'm focusing on doing now is how can we create a more inclusive ownership society? I'm an entrepreneur. I've launched a few companies, but no one ever taught me how to be a CEO. No one ever taught me how to run a company. You can go to business school and try to learn the academics behind it, but I had no one mentoring me. And what I have found, especially in the tech space, right, knowing that now I've got a startup that's happening in the actual tech and digital industry, it's even far fewer people of color that are here. And one of the things that we're doing to create a more inclusive and diverse ownership society is launching an ethnic or underrepresented incubator and accelerator called the ADCOLOR. And it's something that we're launching this year in 2016. We're starting, it focuses on 3 tenets: academic sort of engaging high schoolers, college level, as well as postgraduates, enrolling them into an accelerator or a second tenet of entrepreneurialism, and getting them on the path to either starting their own companies or reinforcing the workplace skills development that they're going to need, right, as they become professionals. And then ultimately having civic partnership with corporate and government. And so that's one of the big things. I think Steve Case really alluded to this in his book in Third Wave, and I think it's a great read if you haven't read it. I just came back from vacation reading that thing within 2 days. You can't put it down. And it's a phenomenal take on how the future of business is going to revolve around the ability to have this civic partnership between government and private business and corporate. So I think, again, what ADCOLOR is trying to do is create the next generation of CEOs. And really our aim is to complement, right, the existing coding or STEM-based programs that are out there, right? It's great that there are programs out there that are focused on, targeting underrepresented communities or people of color or people of different genders, right, and sexual orientations. I think it's phenomenal. But we also, what they're not trained, they're training to be more engineers, which is phenomenal, and we need it. But I want to train the next generation of CEOs. I want owners. I want a more inclusive ownership society, not just a more inclusive tech engineering society. So that's really our ambition. We've got a great program in Hop Up that's launching this summer. It runs from July 11th through August 5th. And on August 5th, we'll be graduating our first class of interns that will actually be migrating into the accelerator program.
Congratulations, man. That's fantastic. Yeah,
Thanks,
I mean, the technical skills are one thing, but really to create a business and have a team and first of all, hire a motivated team and create an environment that they're going to thrive in. Those are skills that you don't learn everywhere, particularly if you haven't been exposed to it. So let's turn to the advice portion of this. If there were 3 pieces of advice you could give to someone who's trying to figure out how to get more engagement around their content, what would it be and why?
So I think there are 3 key things. Simply put, right off the top of my head, there's user centricity is number 1. Design is number 2, and dimensions or ecosystems, and I'll elaborate on that in a sec. But user centricity we kind of covered off on, but in short, it's really about crafting only what people need to know. I think there's a high propensity for us to want to say, hey, we did all this work and we want the world to know everything that we did. Well, you know what? The reality is the world really doesn't care. right? What they really care about is what they need. And I think if you can look at your information and crafting a story around with the end user in mind and leverage design thinking, right? If they don't need to know about the methodology, there's no reason to tell them and you know what? You have the volume of information. Give them something in a breadcrumb trail that wants them to engage with you and follow up with you after, right? You don't have to give it to them at the outset. Give people what they need to know, and that does that's like 80% of the work there. And I think it's a matter of communicators pivoting. They need to shift to that level of positioning of their materials, right? Design it with the end user in mind, how they're going to use it, why they want it, and why it matters to them. And now you're on the right track, right? Secondly, design matters. And in and of itself, design is really a direct implication, right, of being user-centric. But you also got to think that we all love design, right? Even though, like, obviously I'm a designer by trade, but design matters. Think of those websites. And again, I've got to give it to the city of Denver. They have actually been revamping a lot of their materials to have a much greater, more fluid user experience. So I thank God for things like Airbnb, right? Even though I'm not an Airbnb user, but I love what they did by changing and disrupting the dynamic of how they use design across everything that they do, from booking a room and the user experience that you have on their website, right, from their pages online, to the actual user experience that you have when you go into the city, right, and how they're able to provide, owners that give information about local city, restaurants, dining, sightseeing, or things that you can do when you're in that city visiting. So they've taken an end-to-end approach, and design really matters. I think if we can think about how things look, right, the rise of visualization, the importance of it, Snapchat, you brought it up earlier. These are things that are built with design at the core of these platforms. I think communicators need to really take that as a key message point in saying, you know what? Okay, I've got to start. It actually matters the way that things look. If you're going to do, 5,000 words on a page that's half line spaced, well, if it's difficult to read, then no one's going to read it. So simplicity, right, from a user-centric standpoint, be user-centric, design really matters, and then thinking in ecosystems and dimensions. And the reason why we say this is because users, they want to access things in a variety of ways. I don't digest my news in just one way, right? We did generations ago with just the newspaper. Then the news media came in, then television came, then radio, so users, their behavior is driven against a variety of media, a variety of ways of being able to digest the information. So think of it as think of your communication as like an onion, peeling it back. If they have one bit of information that's maybe in paper form, and then you've got another bit of information that's in podcast, another extended piece of information as part of video, and then maybe ultimately that all culminates in some kind of user experience, right, in person. They've gotten now 4 different dimensions of a body of material. That is quite compelling, because at the end of the day, people remember experiences. They don't remember paper. They really don't. So if you think of building things as part of an ecosystem of information, that can go a long way to driving continued engagement of your material. Especially when you think of timing of things, right? If you roll out a big study, or you roll out a big paper, or you roll out a big white paper or something, or a body of research that you're trying to deploy, and you do it all at once, when you could have just broken it apart, now you have the same report that can be extended in terms of deployment over 6 months or over a quarter, versus all at one shot. And then you have a spike in users, and then you're done. Then you got to build the next thing. Think about it as extending it over a period of time and giving people nuggets of information to bring them down the rabbit hole to ultimately get them to where you need them to be.
People remember experiences more than paper. I'm definitely going to remember that. Marcus, it's been a privilege having you on the show, so thanks once again for joining me. I just want to ask you a few more questions, and then we'll close. Sound like a plan?
Absolutely.
All right. On this podcast, we like to talk about policy and entrepreneurship, but also about what makes successful people like you tick. Tell us, Marcus, what are some habits, tactics, and apps that you use every day to stay on top of your game?
I think there's a few of them, but I think one of the most important ones that I have is Flipbook. Flipbook is a great app that allows you to custom curate your own news feeds into a user experience on your mobile device that's very much like reading some type of magazine, right? So basically, I can custom curate all the different topics that I have that are relevant to my industry, relevant to my passions, right, and relevant to news, and have them all curated by the outlets that I choose to have. So very efficient. I don't need to source, 13 different sites to be able to get that information. Again, we're all looking for more time. Flipbook really helps me to get through that. For fun, obviously, I'm a bit of an older generation, so I'm not as much of a Twitter, handler, although I am on it, and you'll see some kind of interesting feeds on it. But I'm also a big Facebook user, and again, social media I use more as entertainment. Going through the live feeds, and when I need a break from the day's churn, I quickly turn to social media to be able to give me something to just refresh my mind, reconnect, but also be able to have some laughter in the day. I mean, the video feeds of some of my friends can sometimes be quite embarrassing, but it's hilarious, and it allows for some great fodder. And then I think, outside of the other apps that we've got, things like Snapchat are also, it's interesting to see where they're headed, where they're going to be shifting towards and how they become more user-centric, not just for fun, but how can you utilize them, right, and leverage them as part of your day-to-day routine, as part of your day-to-day from an industry or professional standpoint, will be really quite interesting. The rise of Slack and a lot of other types of platforms, that they're blurring the line between what is work and what is business and what is just regular user behavior. And that's one of the ambitions that we have when we roll out our platform later this year. We're really excited about what we've got on tap that's going to translate the way in which people engage with, business information and research, but it's going to be much more lifestyle centric, and it'll feel a lot more like you're reading, your favorite magazine, as opposed to reading some type of academic volume. So we're excited. We're excited for what we've got.
And you mentioned Steve Case's The Third Wave earlier. Is that the book you want to go with to recommend, or do you have another one?
No, I think for me, that's the most recent. I think it's the most timely. He's got very poignant advice on not just entrepreneurs, but how to think about what the future of business is going to look like as it relates to, right, the digital economy. And I think there's so many companies right now that are struggling to not only bridge that digital transformation, that gap, but it's also it's a book that actually, if you're inside of a corporate, sort of big company, you're looking at what the future is going to look like in terms of how you've got to be able to position your products and your services and being able to engage more effectively. But also, if you're a startup entrepreneur, right, on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's how to build a great set of products and tools that you can actually deploy, that users, what the future economy is going to look like, and how to most effectively position your products and services there. So it's a phenomenal read, man. I think within 2 days, I couldn't put it down on vacation. So it was a fantastic, fantastic read.
Well, thanks again, Marcus, for joining me. Do you have any final ideas you'd like to leave with the audience before we close? And where can folks find you online?
Online, just very quickly, you can find me on Twitter, obviously at Stickydocs, all one word. Also under at Marcus Jiménez, all one word. I came in so early on the social media landscape that most of my social media handles are the same. So you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram under the same names. But I think more than anything, I think, the media landscape is going to continually evolve. The minute, especially for a lot of policymakers, especially the Beltway, right? When you're thinking about how you're going to be engaging and you're daunted by everything is changing every day, it's going to continue to change. Change is constant. It's never going to stop. And you're only going to see newer platforms rise and rise and rise. So at the end of the day, you need to find a way to be able to stay true to the information that you're looking to deploy. And as long as you keep the end user in mind over how and what it is that they're looking for, and craft stories that are compelling, but that are built around what they need, then you're going to be in the right place. Then you're really looking at just leveraging the tech as opposed to building for it. And I think that's a key piece that we need to get back to, is the idea of, at the end of the day, it comes down to a great story. It doesn't matter, right, what platform you're going to use. If you got a bad story, ain't nobody reading it anyway. So that would be my best advice. And again, just keep things simple, man.
You've been listening to Marcus Jiménez. Marcus is founder and CEO of Stickydocs, a content creation, data visualization, and publishing platform for enterprises of all kinds. In 2014, Stickydocs was the winner of the Tabby Business Award for Business Enterprise Marketing App. Marcus has also been recognized by Agency Post, the American Marketers Association, the Art Directors Club, the Society of Publication Designers, and the ADCOLOR Industry Coalition, where he was honored as a Change Agent Award Recipient and currently serves on its board of directors. Marcus, thanks once again for joining me.
Thank you, Joe.
And that concludes episode 47 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. If you like what we do here, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment and head over to iTunes and give it a rating and review. It helps others know what they can expect from the show and helps us out tremendously. And thanks again to all of you for listening, and I will see you back here next week.
Thanks for listening to the Washing Tech Policy Podcast. You've been briefed.